UK private equity firm Cinven Limited invests in business, consumer, financial, healthcare, industrial, technology, media, and telecommunications sectors. Now, in 2023, the company faced a margin call on Synlab AG, which is a German firm which provides medical diagnostic services. Now, private equity firms have been using, margin calls backed by shares in companies they've taken public to supercharge returns for more than a decade. They've also done it to return cash to clients frustrated by the recent drought in asset sales. Industry executives estimate up to 50 billion of that debt is now outstanding. Is it a bad thing or not? We actually spoke with Israel Adebomi, who's an investment professional, private equity at African Capital Alliance. He first defined what a margin call is, and then we discussed the private equity outlook for Africa and also for Nigeria too.
So margin call, right, I think is quite a very simple concept, but sometimes gets, confused, right? So, in simple terms, it's a concept that, it's typically used in practice when there is, some involvement of leverage, right? So, in basic terms, or what I would like to say in layman's terms, right, what happens is when you use the leverage, right, which is basically a fancy word for debt, right? So, essentially, it means you sort of expanded your risk, right? Essentially meaning that, your investment could potentially go north or south, right? So, a margin call happens when your investment tends to go north, right? South, yeah. Right? So it's beginning to underperform, right? So essentially it means that you as an investment firm have to sort of put forward more cash to sort of cover your position, essentially cover, some losses that you've begun to sort of realize. Yeah. So that essentially is what the margin call is.
Yeah. Now, Hollywood took this on. I don't know if you saw the 2011 movie, Margin Call. Did you see it? What did you think of that?
Yeah, it was a wonderful movie. And my sense, any serious finance professional should go see that movie. I personally have seen it, over 3 times.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, multiple times. Now, as far as Cinven Limited is concerned, what did you make of this particular margin call of 320 million that was estimated in their own case?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, first of all, I would just like to commend the firm. Right, I think, first of all, just the ability to be able to, because from what I read, they were actually able to, recover that cash of about $320 million. So they were able to get their investors who they had already distributed cash to sort of, call them to sort of return those money back, right? This is something where, it's something that might not be very conventional, particularly in Africa, having your investors who you've already distributed money to, having them bring back that cash, right? So I think, it's something that, is probably very popular in the developed markets, but, in places like Nigeria, emerging markets like Nigeria, it might be very challenging to, to just get investors who you've sort of given money to bring their money back, right? I think I would just like to commend them on that. And overall, I think it's a popular concept, yeah. Right? Basically very similar to NAV loans. It's something also very popular within just, essentially private equity firms using, debt to sort of, amplify returns. It's also very popular in Africa, very popular in Nigeria as well. So yeah. So it's
for viewers, NAV is net asset value?
Absolutely, okay. Net asset value, correct.
Fantastic.
Yeah.
There's a quote I want to put up for our viewers, and I want you to get a load of this. This is from a player in the space that says essentially that if you are adding additional leverage, basically that leads to more problems. I think the gentleman is called Brian Dana. Yeah, there it is. It says anytime a manager is introducing an additional layer of debt or leverage, it can create an opportunity for things to go wrong. And he's with Maketa Investment Group. I think they outsource investment services. What do you make of that quote?
Yeah, it's quite right. I can't fault the quote. Right, because what leverage does is, it amplifies your risk and amplifies your returns as well. So definitely, when things go bad, right, if you've got leverage, you're basically the losses you could potentially record, way amplified, right? So it's absolutely right. But I think, just in terms of, looking at investment from a very developed and, optimal perspective, I think it's important to always embed some level of debt or leverage, right? Particularly when you have very strong conviction in terms of the performance of your investment, right? But definitely, it's important for investors as well as the market to be aware of just the impact leverage could have on investment, essentially amplifying, the potential for, risk and return. So it just amplifies that. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Well, moving to the African continent, what is the private equity picture like for the continent? Is it promising? How are you seeing things across the continent?
So absolutely. I would like to start with Nigeria, right, where, my firm, African Capital Alliance, operates out of primarily, even though we are a Pan-African firm with, an AUM of over $1 billion. So I mean, generally, the private equity market, in Africa generally, I think is improving. I would say in Nigeria particularly, I think last year was, somewhat, a bit, funny, right, because of the elections. And, just all macro things going on, right? Inflation, the forward dynamics, the convergence of the FX rates, right? So, foreign investors were sort of a bit worried, right, in terms of, or rather the better word is uncertain, right, in terms of, what the market outlook would look like, right? But, just from that perspective, right, the market is beginning to settle. Investors, particularly foreign investors, they are confident, right, and the country is beginning to improve just because there's a bit more clarity in terms of what the potential outlook from an investment perspective in Nigeria and within Africa could sort of look like, right? So, for instance, the FX rate, right, I think when it initially converged, right, there was literally no sort of clarity in terms of, where to sort of go in terms of the ceiling and the floor. But I think now, investors sort of have a clearer sense. It might not be very certain, but there's certainly a clearer sense in terms of what that ceiling and floor would look like. And I mean, of course, I'm in this space, right? I've definitely been seeing more. We've been getting more calls from foreign investors looking interested. As a matter of fact, just about 2 days ago, some Nigerian, delegates were actually sent to a country called Belarus to sort of, seek FDIs, right? And I mean, essentially, they were able to sort of secure soft commitments to get them to come into Nigeria for a period of 5 years. So generally, right, the private equity space in Nigeria, I think, is definitely way better than last year. And I think, one thing the president has been doing also is just been very intentional about trying to get the FDIs in, which is super critical, right? And I keep also saying this just from the perspective of our FX rates. I feel like if we're to actually do the actual work to defend our FX rates, what we need, right, is to actually be able to secure long-term FDIs. So I mean, so my sense really is, the market is improving, and I mean, we are sort of seeing improving investor confidence as well. But notwithstanding, there's still sort of a long way to go as regards to that also.
So if those soft commitments become realized, how patient should the capital be coming into Nigeria?
Yeah, I mean, so I mean, textbook definitions, right? I think from a private equity standpoint, the typical holding period is 5 to 7 years. So, I mean, investors are very aware of this, especially sophisticated investors, very aware of, our typical holding period of 5 to 7 years, right, before they can sort of start realizing their investment. So 5 to 7 years is the standard, even though increasingly, right, private equity firms are sort of seeking to, minimize that holding period, sort of reduce it, to sort of shorten that 5 year to 7 year holding period so that they can, return capital back to investors and, just sort of, sort of improve that engine wheel, right? So, I mean, typically it's a 5 to 7 holding year period, right? Okay. And I mean, but again, it depends on, the purpose of the investment, right? Because I mean, you definitely see, the likes of infrastructure investment spanning, 15, 20 years, right? But I think just a typical private equity play, is a 5 to 7 year holding period.
Have to be patient. Which sectors do you think look the most appealing in Nigeria?
Yeah, I would say, because I cover TMT majorly with African Capital Alliance. So I would say.
What does TMT stand for?
So it stands for technology, media, and
telecommunications.
Yeah. Okay. So I would say technology, right? Definitely. In Nigeria and Africa is one of the most attractive sectors, just given the fact that, I mean, we are sort of behind compared to the developed markets, right? I mean, I keep saying this thing. Sometimes tech in Nigeria is as simple as a copy and paste model, right? Just basically take, the algorithms that have worked in developed markets and just implement them here in Nigeria. So tech, for one, is absolutely a sector to play for. I would say outside of tech also is just renewable energy. Obviously, given the challenges that we are having with electricity, right? Yeah. I think, for instance, we are living in Chevron, right? We've not had stable electricity for days. I think we're having maybe 6-8 hours of power, right? But I mean, thankfully, I have a solar in my house, so I mean, I don't sort of feel the brunt that much. But I mean, that just shows you the impact, right, that renewable energy could sort of have, in a place like Nigeria, in a place like Africa, right? And I mean, just given the increasing awareness when it comes to energy transition, I feel like also that's definitely a sector that is, receiving, increasing awareness and one that is absolutely there to play for as well.